Welcome to God's Playbook with your host, Father Rico Passero.
Lock at the 20, 10, 5, touchdown! Touchdown!
Let's play ball.
Friends, welcome back to God's Playbook. I'm here again with my friend, Father Michael Basque, a brother priest of the diocese. Welcome back, Father Michael.
Thank you, Rico. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's always great to have you. Father Michael, last time our listeners were graced with the joy of hearing and learning about your vocational story. Thanks for coming back. Maybe today we can unpack the joy of priesthood for you.
Okay. Well, maybe what I'll do is I'll start with my early priesthood and how it's progressed over the 35 years I've been a priest.
Okay.
Okay. On the 26th of May, 1989, at the rehearsal for my ordination next day, Bishop Fulton looks at me and tells me I'm going to St. Alfred's Parish. Now, Monsignor Leo, who wasn't supposed to do this, but I guess as a friend, he was dropping rather significant hints that that's where I was going.
Yes.
So I go to St. Alfred's. It's a big parish, 4,000 families roughly, 5 schools, and all the other stuff that goes with it, right? And the weddings and baptisms and funerals and all the other stuff that goes with it, right? So I'm going there and I'm a little intimidated because, this is a big parish. I'm a fresh-faced kid out of the seminary, and I was the only associate. Now, Monsignor O'Donoghue, Vince O'Donoghue, who's sadly passed away, very shy man, but very kind man, very good priest. And I remember our first meeting before I moved in, and we talked about he wanted me to do at least 3 of the schools, fine. He wanted me to do RCIA. We laid out what he wanted me to do.
Yes.
And, as I'm driving back to Grimsby, where I was staying at the time, I was thinking, what did I get myself into?
Yes.
Because it's a little intimidating. But then my thinking was, Fulton must have thought that I could handle this because he wouldn't have sent me there. I don't think a bishop sets a guy up for failure. So he must trust my ability. He must see something in me that maybe I don't. And this is a lesson I learned multiple times in my priesthood. Sometimes a bishop will see things in you that you don't think are there, but are there. And then you discover them and you think, that's why he did what he did.
Yes.
So I move in the 23rd of June, 1989. I remember that day very well. And I, put all my stuff in my books and all my other stuff, and I get started. And then right away there's a problem because the seminary had thought that the diocese was going to get me the civil license to marry people. You know how in order to marry somebody, you have to apply to the provincial government to get a license to marry people.
Yes.
Right? The seminary thought the diocese did it. The diocese thought that the seminary did it. So it wasn't done. I didn't know about this, right? So I show up and I can't do weddings for 6 weeks. Oh. Needless to say, I didn't get off on a great start, but Monsignor was very forgiving, very supportive.
Good.
So at the time, Father Colley, then Monsignor, now Bishop Colley, was the one who handled the paperwork. So he got it done as fast as possible. He was great for that. He knew exactly how to get what had to get done. And I'm grateful for now Bishop Colley. He's now retired, for his assistance in that and a number of other things.
Yeah.
So, so once I got my license to marry, that made things run a little smoother. But my first year in the priesthood was really brutal. You ever watch the movie Saving Private Ryan?
Yes.
You remember the Omaha Beach scenes?
Yes.
That was my first year or 2 in the priesthood.
Okay.
And the thing was, like,
for our listeners who might not have seen the movie, what do you mean by that?
Well, okay, I should have explained it. Okay. You have Tom Hanks, his little platoon, land on Omaha Beach, and there's gunfire all around. Guys are being shot all around him. It's not a pleasant part of the picture. But what you see is this small group of guys crawling up the beach, having to deal with all kinds of problems. As I said, some of the photography is very graphic. And the thing is, apparently Spielberg, who directed the film, what he did was, after he shot it all, he brought a bunch of guys who actually were on Omaha Beach that day. And they said, this is the first war movie we ever saw that actually captures what battle is really like.
Okay.
I always remember that. But the point being is that you felt under siege because you had stuff coming at you all the time. You could get 3 funerals in a week. You didn't have time to sulk over the fact that you didn't preach well at the last one because you got another one tomorrow and you got to pull yourself together because you got to do it. Or weddings or baptisms or whatever. And I said, Monsignor O'Donoghue was very supportive. He was shy, but he kind of kept pushing me. But the other thing too, and this is what really got me through that first year in the priesthood, because it was brutal. There were a number of couples that I got to know very quickly. We all had one thing in common, worldwide marriage encounter. And that's what attracted me to that movement because I'm involved in it up to today. And they kind of took me in hand and they'd invite me over for dinner. And one of them had a pool, so I could go swim in their pool, which was nice. And, they always seemed to be there. Whenever I had a problem, I always seemed to be the solution to it. I needed a reader. Oh, I'll read for you, Father. Or I need this or I need that. And most of these couples were also my marriage prep team. And back then we did marriage prep twice a year at St. Alfred's. So over the course of that first year, as I got to know these people, even though I felt very stressed by just being literally thrown in, just trying to survive, just trying to keep going, moving forward, having all this stuff that I didn't understand happen around me, things I couldn't control, things I didn't understand. These are the people that kept me going.
Okay.
These are the people who supported me and would help me. Can I help you with this, whatever. So, after my first year of priesthood, then we had another priest come in, a different pastor, who was sometimes a little hard to get along with, but another good priest. And we worked, it was a slightly better fit, I would put it that way. And it was after my first year of priesthood that I kind of got my feet underneath me.
Yes.
And things started to balance out. And then by the end of my second year, I loved being at St. Alfred's. I never wanted to move. I mean, when I moved there, I thought 3 years minus 1 day, 3 years minus 2 days, 3 years minus 3 days. That's how I was going to get through my time at St. Alfred's. But by my second year, end of the second year I was there, I loved it. The people were fantastic. See, I understood how to survive in a big parish. I understood how to organize my time, how to set priorities. What do you need to do? What do you maybe not need to do right now? I learned how to lean on other people. They had some really, and still do have some really fantastic people at St. Alfred's. These are I think they're some of the best people I've ever worked with. They're bright, they're innovative, they're perceptive, they see what's going on around them. They give you advice, they don't push, but they give you advice. Think, what about this idea? What about that idea? Whatever. And so what happened is by the end of my second year at St. Alfred's, I was, I got priesthood. I began to understand. I began to relax a little bit too. That helped.
Okay.
And I mean, I won't tell you that every single day of my priesthood has been a complete joy. But by the end of my second year of priesthood, the joyful days were certainly outnumbering the not so joyful days by a significant margin.
Mm-hmm.
Even in that first year, there were still lots of happy times where things would happen. And like I said, after the second year, things rolled. The second 2 years of my priesthood were really, really important. And I felt, it's hard to describe. It was just wonderful. Then this was the real moment that tested my mettle, if you will, and the real moment that I really felt cared for at St. Alfred's. My father, who was my best friend, died suddenly on November the 3rd, 1991. And I had gone home. It was a Sunday afternoon. I'd gone home that day. I had to come back Monday because I had something on Monday night. I think it was funeral prayers. And so what happened was I went to see my parents, as I would do, and I was going to stay overnight. And when I arrived, there were cars in the driveway, which didn't happen at our place. So I knew something was up. So I walked in, and my mother told me this. And then immediately I phoned St. Alfred's. Now, I had not gone home in my blacks. I'd gone home in jeans and a T-shirt, or in a shirt, right? So I didn't have my black suit. Well, guess who was going to do the funeral, right? So I had to drive back to St. Alfred's the next day. Once we set up the funeral arrangements, because we didn't pre-plan the funeral. The point being is that I went back there, and of course, immediately, everybody knew. I mean, everybody at St. Alfred's Parish knew that my father died before I did, because they were phoning all around. Because the problem was, I left St. Alfred's right after the last mass, and I'd gone to visit parishioners. I didn't tell anybody that's where I went, so nobody knew where I was. So they were all worried about me, and they were all trying to phone each other. Where is Father Michael at your house? Is Father Michael at your house? Where is he? We can't find him.
Yes.
So anyway, so I come home, and of course I got a lot of support from. I went to visit some friends of mine. They were just so great. But I guess the point I'm getting to is at the funeral prayers the night before the funeral. I swear there must have been a busload of people from St. Alfred's that came.
That's so
I mean, well, that's just it. Like, there were the friends that I was close to, the ones that got me through the first year. Oh, they were all there.
Yes.
But even people who I knew pretty well, but I didn't think they were coming. They didn't come to the funeral. They came to the prayers. Now, for a lot of people, they had to work the next day. So they actually drove all the way from St. Catherine's to Oshawa, 2 hours, and drove home for 2 hours to come and spend half an hour with me and my mother. I introduced them to my mother, of course, and that.
That's so great.
And then the funeral mass was the next day. And Bishop Fulton came up. And there were a number of priests. I was surprised the number of priests that came up because we almost didn't have enough room for them in the sanctuary. And the number of people that came up. Some people took the day off or were able to do it. So, like the number of people from St. Alfred's who actually came to my dad's funeral was a surprise.
Wow.
I didn't expect that. And I figured, okay, they might come up for the prayers but these were people who actually came up for the funeral.
Yes.
So that, and looking out and looking at them. And I was a little upset because I was very close to my dad. And here I was having to do his funeral because he kind of wanted me to do the funeral. And I remember that my sermon was okay, but it was not great. But the point is looking out and seeing all those people who came all this way just for me. Oh yeah, that stops you in your tracks.
Yeah.
That was another one of those moments where, you realize the impact you're having on people and the impact the people are having on you. It's a two-way street, right?
That's true.
So I did my 4 years at St. Alfred's. I was at Scapular Parish for a year. Then I asked the bishop for a sabbatical, which that is Bishop Fulton graciously granted it to me. Bishop O'Meara agreed to go ahead with it. I wanted to study church history, but my plan at the time was not well organized. I loved to go to school. And the thing is that I hadn't got that out of my system.
Yes.
So I guess maybe they just decided, let him get us. So I did my year, and then that was the end of it. But then he got chaplain at Brock for 3 years. That was an interesting experience working with young people. We got to do all kinds of interesting things. And then after that, I got my first parish. Now, for part of that time I was at Brock, I stayed at Holy Rosary. For part of it, I stayed at the cathedral, which was really interesting. I was at the cathedral for almost 23 months. The nice thing about that is it's the diocesan church. You meet people from all over, and it's a great parish. It's a great variety of things going on. So I got exposed to a lot of things. That's when the cold was just starting in St. Catherine's. They really wanted the cathedral to come on board. I was a little bit involved in that.
Great.
Then after that, I had my first parish assignment as pastor, St. Patrick's in Meriden, which was a great experience. And it's one thing when you're the associate, you only have to worry about show up for the funeral, whatever. Then you're suddenly pastor and you got to pay people, make sure there's enough money to pay your employees because they kind of like getting paid, pay the bills, that sort of things, right? But you got to make sure all of a sudden, when there's a problem, right? Okay, when there's no toilet paper in the women's washroom, guess who has to go in and put the toilet paper in the washroom? I'm not making this up. This actually does happen. As pastor, right? So all of a sudden you're pastor, think, wow, I'm pastor, I'm important. But you realize, oh my God, it's a lot of responsibility. There's so much little stuff. 40% of my time as a priest is stuff that it's not priestly stuff. It's all that other stuff. But you have to do that other stuff to keep a parish going. Now you can have a finance committee, you can have a really good secretary and bookkeeper, which I've had. But you're responsible. So you have to make sure everything, you're up on everything. 5 years at St. Patrick's in Meriden, a small parish. It was a bit of a struggle sometimes, but we managed to, move the parish forward, started some things in the parish, which are still plugging along pretty good.
Yeah.
Then I spent 2 years in Cayuga. That was a surprise. Bishop Wingle at the time calls me in and says, I'm moving you. Okay, fine. So I'm going to go see you. So I think it was a Saturday morning, he comes over. He says, I'm moving to Cayuga. Oh, now I've been at St. Pat's for 5 years. Cayuga was kind of like the last place I expected to be moved to. I didn't realize until later why he did it, and it was a wise move. Okay, I'm going to Cayuga. Oh, that's nice. So I packed my stuff, go out to Cayuga, and I was there for 2 years and 2 days, exactly. But the people out there were fantastic. It was my first time in a rural parish. And the thing is, in rural communities, The church is very important. It's a social bond. It brings the community together.
Yes.
And Cayuga is a very stable parish, very easy to run. I had no problems there. So I was there for a little over 2 years, and I enjoyed my time there. We had a roof problem. We had a roof problem, by the way, at St. Pat's in Merritton. Got that fixed. Then I go next parish I go to. Guess what? We have a roof problem.
Another roof problem.
Enough roof problem. And then it's funny, the next parish after that. So after I figured I was going to be in Cayuga probably 5 years. So it's the last day of retreat in 2005. So Bishop Wingo calls me and I want to see you. There's a whole lineup of guys outside his door. I'm thinking, what's this about? And it's about moves. Well, we sort of figured it was. So where am I moving? Well, I want you to move to Thomas Aquinas. Okay, that's a nice parish. Good reputation. And whatever. Now, I think part of the reason why is when my dad died in 91, 96, my mother, he moved out to New Brunswick where she was born. And she came back in 2001. So in 2001 until 2003, I was at St. Pat's in Merritton. She was at the Carmelite place. Then the bishop moved me for 2 years out to the country. Well, I still got to see my mother, but not as often. I don't know if that was the reason why, but he decided to move me back to Thomas Aquinas, which meant it was a 10-minute drive with traffic from where my mother was, which was great. Which where we are the whole.
Really?
And that was the time that my mother died. But the point is that, but again, the people rallied around me, the parish. We had a roof issue, which we were able to resolve. We had a big water issue with the basement flooding. We took care of that. But the people, much like what happened in Cayuga and much like what happened at St. Pat's, the people rallied. This was their church. I was their pastor, but this was their church. They took ownership. I let them do things because they know a lot more about plumbing and about heating systems than I ever will.
Yes.
So they took responsibility. They raised the money. They looked at, checked over to make sure that we were getting a good deal and all that sort of thing. So by the time I get to Thomas Aquinas, in a way, Thomas, I got to be careful when I say this. Thomas Aquinas was my favorite assignments because by that time I had the experience being in the priesthood for a certain amount of time, but also it was a good parish, it was a good fit. I spent 8 years there, longest time there. Then I went to Waynflete for 5 years again, which was nice. And then after that, I got moved to Holy Rosary and then to Scapular, where I've just left right now. But I guess part of it is that there's a lot of things that I've had happen to me over my experience. School masses can be an adventure. One of my favorite things to do is sit cross-legged in a grade 2 class and talk to the kids about First Confession, First Communion, because they're so honest. I remember one time I went in, I had my little presentation ready about First Confession. So I sit down and I do my little first part and I said, is there any questions? Yeah. Father, why did my grandmother have to die last week? Well, guess what? We're not talking about First Confession anymore.
That's right.
We're talking about, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. How do you feel about that? Whatever.
Yes.
Like, kids are so honest. It's refreshing because I always remember that moment because it was one of these things where I had my nice little lesson plan was all done up. It was all, I talked to the teacher, but it was all going to be perfect, right? Boom. That's what you got to be ready for in the priesthood. The stuff that hits you out of the blue. Same is true with hospital calls. Now, people are going to think I'm crazy when I tell them this, but I'll get called at midnight. When the phone rings at midnight, you know who's calling. It's the hospital. Now, this happened to be many times, not to criticize my brother priests, where I was on call that night. Whoever's on call isn't going to pick up the phone or didn't pick up the phone, whatever. Who cares? And I remember one time, God, it was snowing out. I was in Waynflete and I pick up the phone. It's the hospital. So from Waynflete, the parish in Waynflete to the hospital in Welland is a good 15, 20-minute drive, give or take. Okay. So I'm driving out and it's snowing. And I have to drive along the feeder canal, which is a deep ditch. Get there. Okay. And they always, the nurses saw, sorry to bother you, Father. I know you're not on call, but we can't get anybody. What am I going to do? Say no? Do you think the family cares? They need a priest and you're it.
That's right.
So I've had that happen. So I go there and I walk in and there's the person who's not dead yet, thank God. And there's a couple of family members there and they're upset, obviously. And I know it's funny. I have stuff like that happen to me all the time and I drive home and it takes you hours after you get home before you get to yourself. You might not get any more sleep that night. But I'd never get it going. It's a privilege. Even though I hate being woken up at midnight, It's a privilege because the reality is that like you're there at a critical moment in somebody's life. And I mean, I've gone into the hospital room where I walked in and somebody from the family ripped a strip off of me. Why is God punishing us? Why is my mother dying? Why is, and you realize they're not yelling at you. They're yelling at the cancer that's just killed their mother.
That's right.
They're yelling at the cancer because they have no control over this. This hit them out of the blue. Something terrible has happened. It might be an accident. Maybe somebody gets killed in a car accident and they're barely alive and you anoint them before they die. And how could this happen? They got all these fundamental questions.
Yes.
And you simply sit there and listen. Don't try to give them an answer because there isn't one.
Right.
All you do is sit there and listen. Those are some of the most precious memories I have as a priest. And people listening will probably think I'm crazy because how can you, but there's something profound. There's something deep. You are touching people at a critical moment in their life. I mean, I walk into a maternity room not long after somebody gave birth to a child. Now that's a happier memory, right?
Yes.
And walked in and just looking at the mother, looking at that mother, look at that kid, knowing that kid's probably going to have a pretty good life.
Yes.
Just being there for that moment. And this was hours after the child was born, of course. Or, other examples where, somebody's in a confessional box, right? They're spilling their guts out. They've been away from the church for 20 years. They've done horrible things. Or sometimes this happens. A woman will come in and she'll just spill her guts. Mm-hmm. My husband, the kids, she's showing the most intimate details of her life with you because she trusts you. Now, thank God for the seal of confession, because I can't share this with anybody, right? And I'm very careful with the seal of, I have never broken the seal of confession. I hope I never do. But you're extra cautious anytime something confessional comes up.
That's right.
But when you're there at a critical moment in somebody's life, when they really need you, and I mean, sometimes I've gone into a hospital call and the nurse will look at me, thank you for coming, Father. The family's never come to visit this person. They're old, they're dying, and there's nobody here. And I'd like to stay with her for a while, hold her hand, just tell her somebody's here, somebody cares about you, but I got 3 or 4 more patients that I have to look after right now. Thank you for coming. Those are the moments that stop you dead in your tracks. Those are the moments then you think, this is why I'm a priest.
That's right.
And, like I said, whether it's in confession or whether it's anointing somebody, sometimes in a baptism, in a funeral home, all kinds of things.
You're right.
And, it's moments like that. And in terms of other things, I mentioned about worldwide marriage and kind of involved in that. And these weekends, there's 3 couples and a priest. Okay. The couples share their experiences. They talk about witness talks. They witness to their marriage. And they'll talk about, I've seen it after witness talk, one of their talks. Somebody comes, I never thought I'd ever hear somebody talk about like that. They're talking about very intimate details, well, within reason, of their lives.
Yes.
The struggles they'd had, communication, even sexuality, death, all kinds of topics.
Yes.
And the thing is that I remember one time, one of the talks was this father was talking about his son had special needs and how he was embarrassed of his son up to a certain point in his life. And at a certain point of his life, it just turned around and he was crying. When he finished his talk, I don't think a single person in that room, team or couples that were on the weekend, were breathing. You couldn't imagine how silent it was. Wow. It was gut-wrenching. This guy shared something very intimate, if you want to call it that, very close, very personal, but very, and it didn't make him look good. And he was brutally honest, absolutely brutally honest with himself because he had processed this. See, it had happened. He processed it. Now he was ready to share his story. And other people on that weekend, including some of the team who'd heard lots of other gut-wrenching talks before, came up to them, and his wife was there as well, of course, and said, I can't believe you shared that. I can't believe you were that open with peace. It's moments like that that you suddenly realize, wow, it really is a privilege to be a priest. And this is why these are these profound moments. I mean, it's not all sweetness and light. It's all, happy. Some of it's very kind of a deep, profound happiness. I mean, those are some of the examples I could share with you over the course of my parish ministry, marriage encounter. I mean, I remember, I'll just share this briefly. I was doing, for when I was 11 years, between 2006, 2016, I did mission trips to Central America and South America. This one, the local community, who always meet liaison with our people up here before we go down, said they never had mass in their community. Pamplona Alta was the name of the little community. It's basically a mud flat. It's a mud hole on a hillside in San Juan de Miraflores, which is a section of Lima. Okay, so we're gonna get mass. I and my broken Spanish. I'd written my talk in English, my sermon in English, translated. I could read Spanish, but my speaking is not as good. So I go there and I'm looking around at all these people. Here I am. They've been around for 10 years. They never had mass. They had not had mass in 10 years.
Wow.
And just looking at their faces and looking at how appreciative they were. You know, you're Canada. You're all from Canada. You know we exist. There are people in downtown Lima that don't know we exist. And here you come all this way to give us something that's very special to us.
Yes.
These are all people coming from the Andes Mountains. They're poor. They're getting day jobs on construction sites or places like that. They're scraping out a living. Their homes are shacks made of scrap metal and scrap wood. And here they are. They're so happy. They were so appreciative. I remember after that mass, practically every single person in that community walked up to me and said, thank you. Now, people say thank you at the end of mass here, but like, you know,
it's a different
to see the conditions they live under, to see them so happy, to see kids out there playing soccer on a mud hole flat and being so happy, so joyous. I remember one time we visited a favela in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and it's built on a garbage dump. Now, I remember was in there with a couple of the people in the local community. They were showing me around. A couple of our people were there too. And I remember watching this kid play marbles with some of his friends. To see the joy. I mean, this kid doesn't know he's not supposed to be happy. He doesn't know he's supposed to be miserable, right? He's in a depressed country. He's an oppressed class. He's poor. He's whatever. But this kid was having a barrel of fun playing marbles with his friends. And his sister comes up and, well, yeah, those things really stick with you because, like, then you think, why are you so unhappy? If this kid who has 100 more reasons to be unhappy than you are, if this kid's happy, why aren't you?
Right.
Why aren't you joyful? Why don't you appreciate what you have?
Right.
Like, it's moments like that that really stop you in your tracks and make you think, oh. So when you ask me about my priesthood, these are the kind of memories that I have. These are the struggles I have. I mentioned in my previous talk, I struggled with celibacy, not being able to be a biological father, and I have a wife and kids. Practically every day I've been a priest. I can tell you, I've had an experience where I wanted to be a father, biological father, a husband and a father, right? And every single time I ask myself, if I could go back to 1989, the day before I was ordained, and change my mind, would I? The answer is always the same, no. Because this is why God put me on earth. I had to give up something very significant to be a priest. I had to give up a dream of being like my father, of being as good a father as I could, as being a good husband. I had to give that up to do what I'm doing now. And I mean, I did it willingly. I mean, we could discuss whether or not I think priests should be allowed to marry or not, or married men should be allowed to be ordained priests. We can argue that if we want. Doesn't matter. That's the choice I made. I accept it. I live with it every day. But it's still a struggle. But it's moments like having to ask yourself that question and coming up with that answer. It's moments like remembering in your mind that kid or that family in the hospital, even the one where they yelled at me, or, you know, people at a funeral home, or whatever. There's something deeply moving about being a priest. I know if you look at movies, if you look at the culture, priests are all misshapen people. They're all miserable. They're all unhappy. They're all whatever. I don't know where they think they're getting that from because, I mean, I know there's lots of miserable priests around. I know a lot of them. But I'm not. I have high job satisfaction. I don't want to call it that. I mean, I'm, this is what God called me to, and I'm very happy doing it.
Father Michael, anyone who's had the privilege of knowing you as I have, even as a young boy, as one of my parish priests, I mean, you taught me to be an altar server.
That's true. You're a very good student, too, I must say.
Thank you. Anyone who knows you, Father Michael, knows that it's been 35 years of joy. Our diocese has been blessed with your vocation, and the privilege is also ours to see how God is using you as his priest, as his hands and feet, to touch lives every day. As you kept saying, it's a privilege to be a priest. It's a privilege to be a priest. I can absolutely attest, although I'm nowhere near your years of ministry, and I hope to model some of your holy attributes in my own priesthood, and I look up to you in many ways. But I really thank you for giving us a sense of the joys of your priesthood, because even those listeners who aren't priests, maybe men discerning priesthood, many people thanking God for their own priests and your priesthood, are really touched by your words today. So may the Lord bless you with at least another 35 years of ministry in God's vineyard. And thank you for helping us to realize the great gift that the priesthood is.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Friends, for God's Playbook, let's keep Father Michael in our prayers and all of our priests and those discerning the priesthood and religious life and those serving in religious life that continue to serve the church faithfully and lovingly. For God's Playbook, I'm Father Rico. God loves you, and so do I.
If you like what you hear, please consider supporting us using any of our affiliate links in the description below via Buzzsprout, Ko-Fi, or GoFundMe. Thanks, and God bless.